Let's make sure that the stream is fired up across the internet, and then we're going to get right into it. If you're not familiar with the program, we do multi-stream. We're on Facebook and on Twitter. What is that? What is that noise? I'm hearing some strange music. We have some weird music playing on over here at the office. One second. We're trying to troubleshoot over here. We're going to... All right, my friends, we're going to get started anyways. There's some loud music going on in our office. That's all right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful, sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have helped to represent thousands of good people facing criminal charges. We help them navigate through the criminal justice system. And over our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our criminal justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have problems with prosecutors. We have judges not particularly interested in a thing called justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes they have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. And so that's why we started this program called Watching the Watchers, so that we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon that very system with the hopes of encouraging some meaningful change. That's why we're so grateful that you are with us here today to be a part of the show. We've got a lot on the agenda today. The name of the program was Widespread Testimony, not widespread fraud, because according to YouTube, there is no fraud. The election has been done and settled, but that's a little bit strange because there's a lot of testimony going on around the country. Yesterday, we heard from the CEO of Dominion Voting Systems. They were in front of the Michigan legislature, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. We've got a lot of clips today, a lot of clips. So we're going to see a lot of what these people are saying and how they're saying it. We'll do a little bit of analysis on that as well. We're learning that Arizona is sort of piggybacking on this Dominion theme. Arizona is now going to be requesting subpoenaing or attempting to subpoena some additional information about those same voting systems. So I want to tell you a little bit about that. We've got Project Veritas release some new information that's going to shed some light on Julian Assange. We're going to save that for the end of the program. But the real big news of the day was this testimony that took place in front of the United States Senate. We saw that the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Senate Committee hosted a set of hearings today, and Chris Krebs, the former CISA, Cyber Security Infrastructure Security Agency, whatever that stands for, he was in there today testifying as well. And so there's a lot of election news that we're going to get into. Before we dive into it, I want to encourage you to subscribe. We go live at this time every day of the week. The slides that I'm about to go through are available if you would like them with my links, notes, and sources. We're going to put those in the Discord server at the end of the program. Discord is a place that we chat both before and after the show, and you can get a copy of my book. You can get a copy of the slides. Say hello over there on that platform. And that's all that we've got. So let's take a look. Let's dive into it. If you've been following the channel for some time, we've been spending a lot of time talking about the election. I've been saying that this is sort of the legal battle of the century. A lot of people, a lot of minds, a lot of energy has been centered around this ongoing issue. And so we've been sort of monitoring a lot of these different claims as they've been developing and growing and evolving over these last 6 weeks or so. And one of the claims that we spent some time talking about are allegations that Dominion Voting is somehow responsible for altering the course of the election. Been a lot of claims, largely from Sidney Powell, from L. Lynn Wood, sort of from that contingent, that Dominion was birthed out of this situation in Venezuela where Hugo Chavez wanted to, create a voting system, a voting enterprise that ensured that he got elected every single time. And so the claim has been that all of this was born, all of the Dominion systems that we use today were born out of this sort of corrupt bargain, this deal that took place however long ago in Venezuela with Hugo Chavez. And that was kind of one of those claims that we didn't think carried a whole lot of water on this channel. I was looking at that saying, okay, well, so what? Even if that is true, what does that have to do with this election? Even if Dominion has some malfeasance in their past, we need evidence that they did something here and now in 2020. Nobody cares what they did with Hugo Chavez. And I know the point that they were trying to make, that this whole thing was sort of birthed out of this sea of corruption, and therefore we should not take the things that they're saying with any credibility. In other words, if this whole thing was corrupt, we can't trust it today. And so they were trying to make that connection, but I didn't think it was particularly pertinent because it wasn't connected to now. It wasn't connected to here and now in today. And so one of the other claims as it relates to Dominion, we covered it earlier this week. I think it was on Monday or Tuesday. We were talking about this new audit report that came out, and the CEO of Dominion is responding largely to that very report. So I want to give you a little bit of information about the CEO. His name is John Poulos, and then we're going to do a quick refresher on what that Antrim County forensic report, what that looked like, and then we're going to dive into his testimony. So let's take a quick look. Let's understand who John Poulos is. This is him, and you can see here, this is a screenshot from his testimony yesterday. He was sworn in under oath as he was testifying. He made a point to say, I showed up here because I was going to be sworn in under oath, and I want to make the record clear. A couple little tidbits about him from Dominion. It was founded in 2002 in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, by John Poulos and another guy named James Hoover. They develop, of course, proprietary software in-house and so on. This image is from Wikipedia, and you can see this is one of their machines. It's an image cast, precinct count, optical scan, voting machine. In 2010, there were a number of acquisitions. So Dominion acquired Premier Election Solutions from another company. They, ES&S, and there's a whole sort of chain, this sequence of acquisitions and mergers and sales. And, a lot of the issues surrounding Dominion have been surrounding those types of transitions, saying that, these companies will buy other companies that have jeopardized source code, integrate them into their own systems, and then they themselves become problematic because they've been infected by this bad acquisition. And so Wikipedia gives us some information about that. Currently, it looks like Poulos is the president and the CEO of Dominion. He's got a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Toronto. He's got an MBA from INSEAD, don't know what that is. And the other guy has a mechanical engineering degree from the University of Alberta. And as you can see, he is holding his hand up. He is swearing himself into testifying. So he's making these statements under oath. I want to tell right out of the gate, I want to say hats off to this guy for testifying. Largely, I didn't think that he was going to do so. If you've been following us, we've been saying that my advice to these CEOs and to a lot of the other people who are a part of these different voting companies was to just go into hiding, to basically go on a long vacation until January 6th happens, or largely until January 20th happens when the inauguration takes place. Because in my mind, it's very difficult to come out and be effective as the CEO. You're lobbying, you're having to field a lot of different claims that are lobbed at you, and that's a difficult proposition. And as an attorney, you really don't want your client going out there and testifying because they can really step in it. They can make one mistake, and that can open the door to a whole slew of claims, sort of like what we are seeing today. If you poke around on the internet and you look at some of the news, some of the commentary sites, particularly from some of the, I would say, more right-leaning news organizations, they're latching on to a lot of his words, and they're trying to convey that, see, there it is, that statement, that sentence, that one syllable that he uttered shows that this can open up a whole can of worms. And you can do that with anything, with any situation. Anytime you personally ever say something, somebody can take those words and twist them in one way or another. And so what I want to do today when we go through and listen to John Poulos is I want to call your attention to a couple things. Number one, he is being extremely, extremely careful with his language. Very careful. Now, you're not going to see it in any of the clips that I play, but if you go on YouTube and you pull up the full audio session or the full video, you'll see he's testifying for about 3 hours, and it's broken up into 3 parts. Some of the videos will actually show you the Zoom image, and you can see his attorney literally right next to him. And so his attorney is also on the call. And I watched a good portion of this hearing, and his attorney looks like he's about to have a little bit of an aneurysm. I mean, he's on high alert. He's waiting for a moment to object. He's there and available. I think it was his attorney. I'm just speculating on that. He was on the Zoom meeting and he wasn't saying anything, and he was just sort of, watching very intently what John was saying when he was testifying, and largely because I think he probably agrees with me. This is a risky proposition. When our clients, when they're charged with a crime, one of the last things we want to do is put them on the stand unless there's a very good, compelling reason. One of the rights that you have as an American is the right to remain silent. You have a right not to incriminate yourself. And so just whether you're innocent or guilty or not, just the fact that you say something can open up a whole can of worms for you. And so largely we invoke that right. We recommend that, in almost every single situation that you deal with the police or anybody who's investigating you for anything, one of your best tools is to not talk. So the fact that John Poulos is out here testifying in front of the Michigan legislature is a big deal, and hats off to him. I want to kind of pat him on the back for that. Largely, I think this was a response to the Antrim County incident report. The forensic analysis that came out, we're going to dive into here in a minute. I think he essentially had to go and respond to this. I think had this forensic report not come out, I don't think that we would have heard from John Poulos. I think he probably would have stayed under the radar like the other two companies did. So if you watch the full video, the full analysis, or the full hearing, you will see that the person who was chairing the hearing invited two other voting companies to come and testify, but those other two bailed out. It was total of 3 invitations were extended. Only John Poulos from Dominion showed up and gave his testimony. So hats off to him for doing so. You're going to see, well, you may not see it because I sped all these clips up at 2 times speed. It's a little bit fast, a little bit chipmunky, but not really. We're going to break it down when we go through it. Very long, about a 35-minute opening statement, and he's pretty agitated. He's pretty angry. He's out here having to defend his company, and you can see sort of the irritation that is in his body. He's sort of, making these facial expressions like, that's a ridiculous claim, that's another ridiculous claim, and so on, as he's going through and presenting his opening argument. And what we're going to see is a lot of bullet points sort of condensed into one statement. You're going to see he kind of does it in rapid fire succession. So he just says, okay, Venezuela, bogus. Source code, bogus. Overseas voting centers, bogus. The idea that we're connected to the internet, bogus. And he just goes on, really sort of rapid fire succession, and is eliminating a lot of the allegations, many of which we've covered on this program. And so, as I mentioned previously, he's very, very careful with his words. He's had about 6 weeks to prepare for this thing, and he does, I would say, an effective job largely. I mean, he's pretty compelling. And the theme of this show is that our senators, the people who are our legislature, in the legislature who are conducting these hearings, they really don't know what they're talking about, unfortunately. We're going to see that from when we get to the Ron Johnson testimony today in front of the United States Senate. So not in Michigan, but we have some clips. Ron Johnson is asking Chris Krebs, this is a different segment of the program, but he's asking him questions, and you can tell he doesn't even really know what to ask. He's just kind of throwing it out there. He's saying, listen, we got a lot of voting problems. Can you talk about voting? And so it's not very specific. And what we're going to see is that the witnesses who are answering the questions for these senators and for these legislatures are more advanced. They just know better than the people asking the questions, and that makes for very compelling testimony. So let's dive into it. Before we get into the clips, let's do a quick refresher on what we're responding to. So what is John Poulos responding to? Why did he come out of the woodwork to make himself available to testify? It's because, in my opinion, this report came out. This came from the Allied Security Operations Group. We spent some time covering it on Monday, I believe it was. And it was reported on 12/13, so just about what is it? What's today? About 3 days ago. And he says, my name is Russell Ramsland Jr., and he worked at MIT and so on. He's got a lot of background, kind of handling these types of investigations. He is part of the management team of Allied Security Operations. They work with people who came from the Department of Defense, Secret Service, DHS, CIA, and so on. So he's sort of, going through his credentials and laying all those out there on the line. We go on to the next part here, and he says the purpose of the forensic audit is to test the integrity of Dominion voting systems that was performed in Antrim County in Michigan. So this is what John Poulos was responding to. This guy comes out with his forensic audit, and he says, I'm specifically looking into Dominion, and I'm specifically looking into Antrim County in Michigan. So this is directly towards John Poulos and towards his company, and he's got to come out and respond back to this. He says, we conclude here that the Dominion voting system has intentionally and purposefully designed with inherent errors to create systemic fraud and influence election results. I mean, that's the conclusion. So if you're the CEO of a company, that's your company. At that point in time, it's like you kind of have to address that. You can't let that stuff stand, because this is now a concrete report that was submitted in front of the Michigan legislature. People are spreading it all over the place. And so, the old idea that, or the better idea, the safer idea that you just go into hiding until this stuff blows over, it kind of goes out the window, because this needs to be addressed. And it's difficult to send somebody out from your company who's a public relations person or anything, right? Because these are serious allegations. And if you want to go and vouch for your company, you call in the big guy, you call in the CEO, and that's exactly what he did. So let's take a quick look at some of the other allegations, because you're going to see that he's responding to these allegations. In the forensic audit and the forensic report, one of the allegations here was that the allowable election error rate established by the FEC was 1 in 250,000 ballots, so a 0.0008%. We observed an error rate here in Antrim County of 68.05%. And I want to pause on that again, because we have another clip from Chris Krebs where he's looking at these numbers, and he's also saying, well, they were kind of measuring the wrong thing. If you look at the real data, that number doesn't exist. So a lot of people are responding to this claim. Paragraph 7 says here in the forensic report, the results of the Antrim County 2020 election are not certifiable. This is a result of machine and or software error, not human error. So I want to pause on that point also, because what we're going to see from John Poulos out of Dominion is that Dominion doesn't really manage a lot of that stuff. Essentially, they just sell you the equipment. It's free to you to run it however you want. Government, board of electors, county precincts, you can do whatever you want with the stuff. We just sell you the equipment, then it's yours. You can operate it however you see fit. And so he's going to go back in there and sort of make that claim. So he's distinguishing himself from this report. This report is saying this was software error, machine error. He's going to come back and say, no, it wasn't. It's human error. And we're not responsible for the humans, essentially. So let's take a quick look. A couple other bullet points we want to highlight before we dive into the testimony. The computer system shows that vote adjudication logs for prior years, but the adjudication logs for 2020 are missing. And he's saying, we conclude that the errors are so significant they call into question the integrity, the legitimacy of the results in Antrim County, to the point where they're not certifiable. And essentially what he's saying is that you can extrapolate this one county, Antrim, to the entire state. And he's saying that because we found some problems here, probably going to find problems elsewhere in the state, which is going to invalidate the entire election. So let's take a look at John Poulos. Let's see what he has to say. And as I said, this is going to be sped up at double speed, so it's going to sound a little bit fast right now, but he kind of slows down a little bit, and so we can break it down. I want to show you the clip, and then we'll go bullet point by bullet point and add some commentary. So here is John Poulos, the CEO of Dominion.
Our company works with all U.S. political parties, and our customer base and government outreach practices support this nonpartisan approach. In fact, we submit extensive company disclosures to federal and state authorities as terms of product testing, system certification, and ownership information. Dominion is a private American company that provides voting systems in 28 states, regardless on whether they are blue or red states. Dominion Voting Systems did not now, nor has it ever, used SolarWinds Orion platform, which was the subject of the DHS emergency directive dated December 13, 2020. Dominion is not and has never been a friend for communists. It has no ties to Hugo Chavez, the late dictator of Venezuela. We have never been involved in Venezuelan elections. Its machines have never been used in Venezuela. The company also does not have any ties to China whatsoever, including investment or source code transfer. There are no ownership ties to any political parties nor to foreign governments. Dominion has no ties to the Pelosi family, Feinstein family, Clinton family, or George Soros. Additionally, Dominion does not have any servers in Germany or Spain. No votes are sent overseas. Let me be clear. Ballots aren't sent anywhere. Not overseas, not over state lines, and not even over county lines. All votes are counted by local, bipartisan U.S. election officials in the United States. The U.S. Army has debunked claims of secret military raids overseas. Additionally, voting systems are, by design, meant to be used as closed systems that are not networked, meaning that they are not connected to the internet. It is technologically impossible to see votes being counted in real time or to flip them. The comments about our company being started in Venezuela with Cuban money with the intent to steal elections are beyond bizarre and are complete lies. My company started in my basement, which happened to be in Toronto, and our only intention was to help blind people vote on paper ballots. Our very first public demonstration was in 2003 for a city on the other side of the Ambassador Bridge, and my partner and I made a weekend of it and watched.
All right, so he goes into this nice little story about, wanting to help the blind vote and all that stuff. Very nice, very touching, very admirable, appreciative of those efforts. But let's go point by point and talk about what he's talking about. So the first example that he gives is he says, listen, we've been certified by the federal government. We've made disclosures to the federal government. We are a private company. We're operating in 28 states. And he says that every single thing that they've given has been vetted, has been vouched for by the government, by the different authorities. And I think that's kind of hard to dispute, right? I mean, if the state has authorized it, if they've gone through the certification process and they want to use their software, how do you argue with that? We saw previously that Texas was one example of a state that didn't allow Dominion in there. They did their own vetting process, and they said, we don't think that this is secure enough, and they went with a different company, a different provider. And I think there's some weight there. You want to look into these allegations, and you want to see whether or not they've actually been vetted. And it looks like that they have been vetted, or at least according to him, his statement under oath. The other point that he made here is that they're not using SolarWinds Orion platform, right? And this was the software company that we talked about yesterday. We spent a lot of time talking about it. And the idea here is that there was this major supply chain attack that infiltrated this company called SolarWinds. And SolarWinds was a big data provider, a big services provider to some of the biggest companies, some of the biggest government entities in the nation. We're talking about the NASA, the Office of the President. We've got the Justice Department, the Department of Treasury. All of these different entities have been compromised. And there was a lot of speculation that Dominion had also been compromised. And if you look around on the internet, you can see that there was a screenshot of Dominion on their website that said it was using SolarWinds down at the bottom. And so a lot of people looked at that and thought, there it is. This is the connection. This is how one dot is connected to the other dot, because SolarWinds got hacked in a very, very highly sophisticated hack. And Dominion uses their software. Well, when you look into it a little bit further, it doesn't sound like they were using SolarWinds Orion. They were using SolarWinds something else, some other different sort of IT provider, some other different company or different aspect of the SolarWinds company that wasn't as impacted by the hack. And so when you get into this stuff, it's really, really difficult to sort of tease out the meat from the meat sauce. How do you separate the two? They're all sort of bundled in together. And his language here is very careful. He's saying, we never use SolarWinds Orion platform. Not that we didn't use SolarWinds. It's SolarWinds Orion. And so that may be all you need to know, right? SolarWinds Orion was the one that had the problem, not the other different pieces of software or the different tech solutions that they provide. So it's very careful here. When you heard him say this stuff is not connected to the internet, did he say that they're never connected to the internet, that they're never intended to be connected to the internet, that they're not designed to be connected to the internet? Is it possible that they could be connected to the internet? All of these types of questions. And so the language in his prepared written statement was very, very specific. He talks a lot about, Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, the communists. He talks a lot about these overseas allegations. And he says that, none of it's true. None of it happened. None of it really stands to reason that they would even use these things. And I thought it was pretty effective. As we've been discussing a lot of the claims about electoral fraud and voter fraud, this was one of the ones that sort of didn't really ring my bell, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you have all of this stuff, if you have all of these hacks, if you have all of, this voter fraud going on around the country, I think it would probably be easiest to find it if you did it via software. If you actually, if you were able to go seize one of these machines, log in there and see how this all works, look at the source code and see how, literally break it all down. But then when we start looking at what happened with SolarWinds and this really sophisticated hack that essentially was covering itself up and trying to identify antivirus software and trying to literally, dig itself in and then cover itself up. It was reporting out, and, it could receive instructions from a different entity. So, presumably somebody could basically log in and ask that software to delete itself. I mean, there's a lot here. And so what we're seeing, or what we saw a lot out of this hearing in particular, was kind of the same stuff. We saw a lot of the same claims, one side saying, well, we think that there's fraud. The other side here through John Poulos coming out and saying, yeah, there was no fraud, right? And when they ask him questions to try to dial in on it, he can talk circles around them because it's his company. He knows how it all works. He can say, no, actually, no, that's not how it works. There's a little segment that goes on where he's talking about one of the legislators is asking him about modems and how it connects to the internet. And he's saying, well, can't you just plug it in? And he's like, well, no, it's sealed. We've got, tape and labels, and you just can't do it. And he said, if somebody were to do it, if somebody were to break those seals, it's not us, it's not Dominion, it's the people who are running the elections. So in other words, why are you asking me these questions? We just provided you the equipment. It'd be like we just sold you a car and you drove the car like a moron. It's not our fault. We didn't do anything wrong with the car. The car was fine when you got it, but you didn't change the oil. You didn't fix that check engine light. You weren't pumping up the tires. You treated it like garbage. You didn't read the user's manual. You didn't operate it appropriately. That's on you. That's not on us. And so a lot of these legislature individuals were going through and they were asking him questions that was outside the scope of what he's supposed to do. And so he just kind of parried a lot of these different questions as they were coming in, just saying, all right, well, yeah, we didn't do that. We delivered the machine, but I don't know who checked the equipment. I don't know who did any of that stuff. That's on you, state government, not on us. And so he gets into that a lot in this next clip. So let's listen in from John Poulos.
I would now like to explain further Dominion's roles in election. It is important to know that Dominion is never able to affect the outcome of an election. Dominion does not handle voter registration, poll books, or signature verification. We don't supply software or equipment for these services. We don't provide vote-by-mail services, and we don't control or secure voters' paper ballots. We have no role in verifying the eligibility of voters. These are the jobs of bipartisan poll workers and local election officials. Long before Election Day, before we sell our equipment, our voting systems undergo an accreditation process run by the EAC. The process involves compliance with all voluntary voter system guidelines, including standards for secure software design, such as software independence. Dominion systems must be tested by an independent, federally accredited laboratory, and Dominion must disclose its ownership, system source code, reviews, and all component and hardware sourcing information to the EAC. In addition to federal certification, Dominion submits to additional rounds of testing and disclosures in order to get certified in the 28 states in which we operate. Once we sell our equipment to local officials, the machines are under their control.
There it is.
In many circumstances, source code is delivered by hand by state certification officials. Officials keep rigorous chain of custody logs. This is how election officials ensure that equipment is not tampered with. What's more, our systems require a paper ballot that is always in the custody of the local election officials. While we do ensure trained technicians are available on election day, should local election officials need support resolving issues, at no point are local election officials not in control of voting machines. If any Michigander is looking for confidence in the vote counts, beyond looking to the chain of custody and the certification checks and balances, they can always look to the hand count audits and recounts.
Yeah. So in other words, don't stop asking us about it, right? We just delivered the equipment. You guys are the ones who are responsible for running the election. If you screwed it up, if you don't have chain of custody, if you don't verify the signatures, if your people on the ground don't do any of it, it's your problem, not ours. He talks specifically about our role is very minor. We're only providing the equipment. We're just delivering it. We don't look at the voter registration rolls. We don't look at the poll books. We don't handle any of the security that surrounds the paper ballots. That's up to the election people. We don't have no process at all in certifying that a voter is eligible to vote, whether they're registered or not. And we've covered a lot of this on this channel. I think he's pretty much right about that, right? A lot of these rules, a lot of the laws that we've been critiquing here on this program have been changed by the government. The government was responsible for all of these things. They pushed the election deadlines back. They waived the signature requirements. They made sure that you could just go right on the internet and log in and register to vote without voter ID over in Wisconsin, and so on. And so, it's hard to blame Dominion for those issues. Those are election issues. Those are the Secretary of State issues. It's not Dominion. And he goes on, he says, the machines were under election official control after the sale. They've got the chain of custody documents. They're the ones responsible for certifying that all this was done appropriately. So contact them. In other words, why are you here asking me questions? And, I thought from a Dominion standpoint, I thought he did a good job. I mean, honestly, he was effective. He could talk circles around these other legislators. They had no idea what they were talking about. It was difficult as an attorney to even listen to them ask questions. And I don't know why the Republicans are so bad at this. I don't know why they can't get somebody with some credibility who knows more about voting than this guy does, who knows more about the systems, knows more about the machines. They haven't found anybody who's effective at asking these hard questions. They all just are putting on these show hearings where they'll call these individuals in, they'll just sit down and they'll ask a bunch of questions. And I mean, honestly, when I was listening to some of the questions, it was almost as though they were giving John open-ended questions and asking him to incriminate himself. So they would say something like, well, isn't it true that, your machine, could be programmed to do something else? And then John would say, well, yeah, I mean, it runs an operating system, and the operating system has requirements, and we put code on top of that. That source code has been delivered to the FEC and so on, and we've had multiple verifications. The certification happened this day and this day. And then the Congress people, the legislatures, they just go, all right. So what you're saying is it could have happened that the code was different, right? And John's like, well, no, because here in this and this, and it's already certain. Okay. And so it's like, they're asking him questions, expecting him to say, darn it, you got me. You got me on that one. You nailed me. And he's a squirrely CEO. He knows how to answer these questions. He's used to dealing with high pressure situations, and he probably believes his company is 100% legitimate, credible, and authentic. And we haven't seen any evidence really to dispute that. A lot of these allegations have just been allegations, and when the line is drawn in the sand and we have these hearings and we say, okay, now we're going to get some answers, there aren't any answers. It's the same stuff that we've heard previously, because the people asking the questions don't even know what they're talking about. They can't make a good argument, and it's very unfortunate. So is that the end of things for Dominion? Not really. In Arizona, we are seeing here that the Senate President is now asking that the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors issue subpoenas or respond to subpoenas. So this is, once again, a lot more about the voting equipment. They're looking into the ballot images and the adjudication process. This came out yesterday for immediate release from the Arizona Senate President. Her name is Miss Fann, and she said here, today, under my direction as the Senate President Judiciary Committee Chairman, as Senate President, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Eddie Farnsworth issued subpoenas to the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. One subpoena calls for a scanned ballot audit to collect an electronic ballot image cast for all mail-in ballots counted in the November 2020 general election. The second subpoena calls for a full forensic audit of ballot tabulation equipment, the software for that equipment, and the election management system used in the 2020 general election. Board of Supervisors served these subpoenas yesterday on Tuesday afternoon, and they call for the confirmation that the information be delivered by by Friday, December 18th at 5 p.m. And so we'll see what happens there. So, I don't think that the fact that this one interview from John Poulos, or this one hearing, I don't think that's going to satisfy really anybody. In fact, I think a lot of people are latching on to some of those words, and they're using that as a mechanism. They're using that to say, well, see, we told you so. Largely what I've been seeing is this idea that he said the machines are not connected to the internet, which I didn't really hear him say. I kind of heard him say they're not designed to be connected to the internet. And then he expands later on during the hearing where he's talking about, that there are modems there. They're external modems, and they're under seal, and all these different security precautions that are taken there. He goes through and he details all of that. But what people heard was they're not connected to the internet. Then you fast forward to today. Apparently, Chris Krebs, during his testimony in front of the Senate, also said, in fact, they actually can be connected to the internet in some instances. And so now people are going, oh, wait a minute, this is contradictory information. On the one hand, we have the Poulos who says it's never connected to the internet. On the other hand, we have Krebs who says sometimes it is connected to the internet. There we go. We got him. And again, it's like, okay, that is such a minor detail. I mean, it could be a huge detail. I don't want to, downplay that. It could be, maybe this SolarWinds hacker, whoever this person was able to manipulate the system. If one machine was connected to the internet and then they connected it to another piece of equipment, you could theoretically, speculate how them jeopardize and compromise the entire ordeal. But that sounds like a little bit like a stretch without more. Just the fact that a machine can connect to the internet to do something, that doesn't show that the election was stolen. And so I think those ideas, that sort of theme, is not effective for the Donald Trump team. I think it's a losing proposition because the people asking the questions have no idea what they're talking about. They're not effective at it, and it is disappointing because there are some good questions that I think should be answered. And we're going to see this again when we get over to the Senate here with Ron Johnson. So let's take a look before we get there about what's going on in the other House, in the other chamber of Congress, which is the House of Representatives. This comes from Lou Dobbs. Now, yesterday we talked a lot about this idea of a contingent election, or what happens when one electoral candidate, one candidate gets less than 270 electoral votes. What does that look like? Well, in order for that to happen, when the electoral votes are being cast, that means that somebody from the House has to object to the votes being counted. So literally, the votes have been cast by the different electors in the various states. They're now in the process of being transmitted over to the United States House of Representatives. They're going to be counted on January 6th. And so the theory here was, if you can keep Joe Biden under the 270 electoral votes, then what you can do is trigger that contingent election. And so one of the mechanisms of doing that is, as the votes are being counted in the House of Representatives, it's to have one senator and one U.S. representative object to the counting of those votes. So somebody could come up and say, well, look, I'm not from Pennsylvania. I'm not a Pennsylvania representative. I'm an Arizona representative. I object to Pennsylvania's votes being counted. Here's why: X, Y, and Z, right? We've already covered all of the different reasons and problems that exist in Pennsylvania. If one House person does that and they're joined by a senator, then they'll break up into a debate. They'll go into, I think they're separate chambers. They'll have individual conversations about that. They'll call a floor vote on each House. So the Senate would vote on whether to count those votes or not. The House would vote on whether to count those votes or not. If they both agree, those votes are not counted. If they disagree, this is a problem, right? Because the Senate now is in the hands of the Republicans. They have, I think, 52 seats now to 48. If they vote, you would presume maybe you get 51 votes to 49. They throw out those votes. So the Senate Republicans would vote to disqualify. This is all hypothetical. I don't think this is going to happen at all. But hypothetically, let's say that they did. They voted 51 to 49. They're going to throw out Pennsylvania's votes. All right, well, there you go. You got one chamber of Congress who's willing to do that. What happens over with the U.S. House of Representatives? Well, they're controlled by the Democrats. They're going to continue to be controlled by the Democrats on January 6th. So now they would also have to go and give a floor vote, and they would have to decide what to do with Pennsylvania's votes. They're not going to do that, right? They're not going to throw out their state's votes. So what that means is there's a split. You got one House who wants to dump them. The other one wants to keep them. What happens? Well, the votes that were certified by the state's governor are going to be the ones that count. So most of the states have already certified them. So mathematically, it's very, very difficult for the Trump team to see a victory, even if they start objecting to it. Right? We spent some time yesterday talking through this, but what I want to dive into yesterday, the idea was there aren't even any senators who want to join in on this. The House has a number of different people who are indicating that they're willing to sign on to an objection. But the Senate, we were thinking yesterday, they're not interested in it. We saw that Mitch McConnell came out, Senator Thune also came out, and they're saying they're advising their Senate caucus. So the other Republicans, if you don't know Mitch McConnell, he is the Republican Senate Majority Leader. He runs the Senate. He runs the Republican caucus. He's very effective at it, by the way, as well. He's got 3 judges confirmed. He's filled up the rest of the federal bench. He's a pretty effective Senate Majority Leader. He came out yesterday and said, congratulations, President-elect Joe Biden. So when we were on the show, we were thinking, okay, well, it's probably the end of it. You know, he knows his caucus. He knows how his different Republicans throughout the Senate are going to vote. If he's saying it's game over, man, it's probably game over, man. But it really kind of wasn't, because we learned yesterday, right after I got off the show, I saw a new post from Ron Johnson, Senator Ron Johnson, who said that they're going to be conducting a full Senate hearing today as a part of the Homeland Security Government Affairs Committee. They're going to be calling all of these people in. So we want to speculate. We want to think maybe there's more interest in the Senate than we thought. Still makes it very difficult, because even if the Senate did vote to throw those votes out, you would need the House to also concur with that in order to get the compromise between the two houses, in order to overrule the certification from the state. So it's still complicated, but it is more possible if there is enough interest in the Senate. So yesterday I was thinking that's a long shot. Today, you know, Rand Paul and some other senators are looking like they may have a little bit of an interest in joining in these objections. Before we turn over to the Senate, let's take a look at the House of Representatives. This is Representative Mo Brooks, who is on Lou Dobbs last night, saying that he's going to be spearheading this in the U.S. House of Representatives. So we're going to look at the House first, then we're going to finish the rest of the show talking about the Senate. Here is Mo Brooks last night on Lou Dobbs.
Well, where we're headed as a country is this, quite simply. We're a republic, and the bedrock of a republic is an honest and accurate voting system. And if you don't have an honest and accurate voting system, then you may as well throw out the claim that you're a republic. You've lost that right. You've lost the control of your government. And under those circumstances, those who can steal the most votes, who can engage the most voter fraud and get away with it, are going to be the ones that rule the roost in Washington, D.C. That's not what our founding fathers wanted. That's not what 1 million or so Americans who have lost their lives in wars wanted, giving us this republic, this democracy where we could control our own fate and our own destiny. So I have a choice. I can either sit back and surrender and be a part of the surrender caucus, or I can fight for our country. And that's what I'm going to do. So on January the 6th, I'm going to object to the submissions of electoral college votes from various states that, in my judgment, have such flawed election systems that their vote counts are unworthy of our ratification in the United States Congress. What I need is a United States senator who will join me. If we have a House member and a senator, then by golly, that forces a House vote and a floor vote on whether to accept this systematically flawed election system or to reject it. I want to reject it so that we can have an honest and fair and accurate election.
All right, so there he is. And there is, I think there's a draft letter that Rep. Mo Brooks is circulating right now. I just saw that on Twitter. I have not read it yet, but this is a serious thing. They are going to be circulating this letter. It's a draft. They're going to be submitting it to a number of other different representatives to see if they can get them to join. They're also going to be sending it over to senators and different people to, rally up some support so that he's not a part of what he says, quote, the surrender caucus. He's going to continue to fight. And even by his own admission, though, he is saying that if you do get an equal objection, if you get one from the representative and one from the Senate, then it's going to call a floor vote. Well, he's in the House and the Democrats control the House. So even on January 6th, even on that day, the Democrats are still going to control Congress. They're going to control it a lot less than they do currently because they lost a ton of House of Representatives seats this election. They were supposed to gain a bunch of seats, but they lost a bunch of seats. I think like 9-10 seats all flipped towards the Republican, which, by the way, is why many Republicans are like, wait a minute, how did they win all those House seats, but they lost the presidency? Normally you would see sort of a correlation there. If you're going to see this big red wave, which really there was in the House, a number of different votes swapped from Democrat to Republican in the House of Representatives. If you're going to see that type of wave, you would expect to see the same thing at the top of the ticket. But of course, we did not. So Senator Ron Johnson, by contrast, so we just heard from Rep. Mo Brooks in the House. On the Senate side, yesterday, Senator Ron Johnson was out and he posted this. He said, "We are holding an oversight hearing tomorrow," which is today, "to examine the irregularities of the 2020 election. A large percentage of Americans simply don't think this was a legitimate election. That's an unsustainable state of affairs for our country." And so I think we have a clip of him.
We have all kinds of examples of fraud, and we know a large percentage of the American public just simply don't think this is a legitimate election. That's an unsustainable state of affairs for our country. We have to have confidence in our elections. Yes. We need to restore that confidence. One of the ways to do that is with oversight hearings, point out what went wrong so things can be corrected and controls can be put in place for the next election.
All right, so that's what he's talking about. He's on there. I think that was Maria Bartiromo. And this is who was there today. This was the agenda. So this came from the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, the U.S. Senate Committee, examining irregularities in the 2020 election. It was located at the Senate Dirksen building and via video conference. And these are the people who testified today. We're not going to go through all of them, but we have the Honorable Kenneth Starr. You may remember him from the Clinton years. Donald Palmer, who is the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. We have James Troupis. He's an attorney for a law firm. We got the Honorable Francis Ryan, who's a state representative from the state of Pennsylvania. We have Jesse Binnall, who is a partner at a different law firm. And then we have the Honorable Christopher C. Krebs. And Christopher Krebs, you may remember, was the guy who was just recently fired right after he told Donald Trump that there really is no electoral fraud. He came out and he said that, and Donald Trump said, yeah, there was. You're out of here, buddy boy. And so he's not around anymore at CISA. But he was just there, and so presumably he was there during the election, so he was called in today in front of the Senate to discuss what he knows, which, again, what does he know, right? If they're going to be asking him questions about voting machines, does CISA really handle the voting machines, or does Dominion? Because Dominion's saying, we don't even handle the machines. We pass that off to the election officials. So you can just see what's going on here. The scope of the questions are just not relevant. They're going to be asking Christopher Krebs about a lot of stuff that, in my mind, he's not particularly qualified to answer. You know, he headed the head cybersecurity agency in the United States, but he wasn't on the ground floor in the room when election observers were thrown out. So what does he know about that? What does he know about the manipulation of software to throw out signature requirements? Probably nothing. But they're going to ask him questions about those types of issues. So a lot of this, in my mind, is just for show. It's just to bring people in, make a lot of political statements, throw their hands up in the air and say, see, we looked, we investigated this whole thing, couldn't find anything, but it's not our fault. We did the best that we could. And we're going to see that from Ron Johnson himself. We're going to have a clip from him where he's going to be asking Chris Krebs a question, again, in the same vein of, I don't know how any of this stuff works. There's a lot of problems with the voting machines. Can you talk about the voting machines? Can you answer anything about that? Expecting that he's going to incriminate himself. It's a little bit frustrating, but we're going to start with Jesse Binnall. This was him today in front of the Senate committee. So this is Jesse Binnall. He's a lawyer at a different law firm. And a lot of these clips I actually haven't seen, with some fair warning on that. We were doing end-of-year reviews for our team over here at the R&R Law Group. And so I missed a lot of this. Miss Faith clipped some of these things, and so I'm watching them for the first time, some of them, with you. Let's do it together. So this is Jesse Binnall. All right, let's take a listen.
This year, thousands upon thousands of Nevada voters had their voices canceled out by election fraud and invalid ballots. Here's how it happened. On August 3rd, 2020, after a rushed special session, Nevada legislators made drastic changes to the state's election law by adopting a bill known as AB 4. The vulnerabilities of this statute were obvious. It provided for universal mail voting without sufficient safeguards to authenticate voters or ensure the fundamental requirement that only one ballot was sent to each legally qualified voter. This was aggravated by election officials' failure to clean known deficiencies in their voter rolls. Because of AB 4, the number of mail ballots rocketed from about 70,000 in 2016 to over 690,000 this year. The election was inevitably riddled with fraud, and our hotline never stopped ringing. While the media and Democrats accused us of making it all up, our team began chasing down every lead. Our evidence came both from data scientists and from brave whistleblowers. Here's what we found. Over 42,000 people voted more than once. Our experts were able to make this determination by reviewing the list of actual voters and comparing it to other voters with the same name, address, and date of birth. This method was also able to catch people using different variations of their first name, such as William and Bill, and individuals who were registered both under a married name and a maiden name. At least 1,500 dead people are recorded as voting, as shown by comparing the list of male voters with the Social Security death records. More than 19,000 people voted even though they didn't live in Nevada. This does not include military voters or students. These voters were identified by comparing the list of voters with the U.S. Postal Service's National Change of Address database, among other sources. About 8,000 people voted from non-existent addresses. Here we cross-reference voters with the Coding Accuracy Support System, which allowed our experts to identify undeliverable addresses.
All right, so that type of testimony, I think, is a lot more effective than these questions that a lot of these different legislators are asking, right? This is concrete data. This is a lot of the same evidence that we've talked about here. Largely, this came from a guy named Matt Brainard, who his team did this massive data effort where they were comparing these different lists. And what they're doing is they're saying, okay, we got a voter registration list. Let's cross-reference that with the dead people list, right? The Social Security agency has records. They compare. They just cross-reference them. They also look at the National Change of Address form that is available through the U.S. Postal Service. When you move, you want to forward your mail, you go online, you pay that $1 fee, they forward your mail for you. Well, your name makes it on a list. You're on a list, and they know that you moved. So what they're doing is they're comparing and contrasting, and they're saying, well, this is the list. These people left, but they voted. Why is that, right? And this, you can tell from this guy, he's got some competence on this issue. He knows the numbers, he knows the rules. Now, this type of evidence we have not really seen presented anywhere that has mattered. We've seen a lot of the motions, a lot of the complaints, the lawsuits that have been submitted around the country have made these claims. In Nevada specifically, we talked about it. It was actually a very good lawsuit by a woman named Weir, I think her name was, if I remember correctly. We went through her entire lawsuit. She presented a lot of this evidence. The judge just looked at it, threw it right out. Didn't have any more substance substantive hearings. But this, I think, are the more effective allegations. These are the more substantive claims that I think carry some water because it's concrete. It's right in your face. He can just say there's 40,000 people who voted that shouldn't have voted. It's a big deal. And I think regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, don't you want that solved? Don't you want our voting to be credible? Don't you want people voting who are supposed to be voting? Why would people get 2 votes? Every time somebody gets 2 votes, that means your vote, you get half of a vote. They get 2. You're supposed to get 1, but they get double yours. So yours is effectively cut in half. Why would any American in this country want to live in that type of electoral system? So regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, isn't this worth investigating a little bit? Shouldn't a judge have said, okay, well, maybe we should, investigate that a little bit further? But in turn, what we're seeing is that the judges they just say, nope, latches, nope, moot, nope, election's over. Sorry, certification already happened, too late. Nothing else we can do about it. It's a problem. And as we, one of the themes here is that this is going to happen again. We're going to come right back. We're going to have more electoral issues on the next election. And so the court, the Supreme Court, anybody who doesn't want to address this stuff and just keep, moving on and without addressing any of these underlying problems, all we're going to do is encourage more fraud. Allegedly, the Democrats did it this year by having, according to this guy, Jesse Binnall, by having multiple people vote, by having people who moved vote, by having people cast ballots under different names, cast one under William, cast one under Bill. That's a problem. I think it might be prudent as a country to solve that issue because the Republicans are going to catch on. And then what we're going to have are elections where both sides are trying to outfraud one another. And it's not good for anybody. All right, one more clip from Jesse. Let's see what else he has to say. Here he is.
They explain their methods so other
nation should... Wait.
They explain their methods so others could check their work. Our evidence has never been refuted, only ignored. 2 Clark County technical employees came forward completely independent of each other and explained that they discovered that the number of votes recorded by voting machines and stored on USB drives would change between the time the polls were closed at night and when they were reopened the next morning. In other words, votes were literally appearing and disappearing in the dead of night. When we attempted to verify the integrity of these voting machines, we were allowed only a useless visual inspection of the outside of a USB drive. We were denied a forensic examination.
Yeah, that's a big problem. It's a big problem. This is where I think a lot of people have questions about the credibility of the election because they're not given access to go look at this stuff. If they would have given this guy some access to it, he could have presented his findings and they could have responded to those allegations just like John Poulos did. He just did it. They gave access to the Trump team. Jenna Ellis was, hyperventilating, very excited about the fact that they got access in Antrim. A judge allowed them to go in and do a forensic audit of the machines. They did the audit of the machine. That guy wrote a report. Report's public. Now we have something to talk about. Now we have something that we can refute and we can listen to Dominion. What do they have to say about it? Okay, listen, this guy just wrote this report about your company, said your company's garbage. What do you have to say about that? He comes out, testifies in front of the legislature, responds back, said, this is how I explain this, and that. Now we as the public, as the American people, we can see what's really is going on because this stuff is not being pushed into the shadows. Dominion came out and answered questions, as he should have. I don't know why any government in the United States enters into a contract with any election service provider that doesn't allow them to go in and look at how this stuff works. That's insane to me. If they don't want to allow access into the equipment or allow us to just audit this stuff or make it publicly available or allow us to just see what is going on behind the scenes, they shouldn't get a contract from the state. They shouldn't get a contract from any city or any precinct in my mind because it's a public service. It's a public utility. We have a vested interest in knowing how they're running our elections. And if they want the business of us as a citizenry, they got to give us access. They have to be open, transparent, and accountable about it. But right now, what you just heard from Jesse is, oh, no, they didn't give us any access. They said, here's a USB stick. Look at the outside of it. What do you think? Think that's good? You can't get any information for that. And, had he gotten some information, maybe he would have had his own report, his own forensic security company do an analysis. We could have reviewed that. We could have analyzed it. And it could have given the other side a response. But largely what we're seeing is, doesn't matter. All this stuff is just swept right under the rug. Don't even get to talk about it, which is unfortunate. And I think a lot of people, they're going to have a very bad taste in their mouth when this wraps up, if it ever does. I mean, I think a lot of people are probably just going to say, yeah, no, I mean, they're liars. They lied and then they covered it up. They didn't give us any access to see anything. So How are you supposed to, as a normal citizen, just say, yeah, you're right. We'll just forget about all that now. They said everything's fine, so I guess everything's fine. We'll just move on and wait till the next election. Doesn't work like that. Let's change gears. Let's go over to Christopher Krebs, who is the former CISA director. And so I think this is his opening statement. Let's listen to what he had to say. So this was kind of the big highlight. This guy is, I think, very articulate. He presents very well, very confident. This is not his first rodeo. He knows how to handle these situations, and he does an effective job. So we got a couple clips from him. A lot of his language, it's effective because it's nice language. It's good. He talks a lot about democracy and America and, eliminating toxicity and wanting to restore things. But that type of talk is totally irrelevant to me. We're going to play some of it and then we'll analyze it. Here's Christopher Krebs.
Nation should also thank the many federal, state, and local government election partners for the crucial work that's been done that would give our citizens the confidence that their vote was counted as cast. We should also be taking a victory lap, celebrating a job well done.
There you go.
Consider where we started. When I rejoined the Department of Homeland Security in 2017, America had just endured a broad attack on democracy, owing to the now well-documented interference campaign by the Russian Federation. Whatever their other motivations, this campaign sought to undermine confidence in our democratic institutions. Building on the universal agreement across the national security community that we cannot allow that to happen again, the CISA team started with what needed to be improved based on the 2016 elections. First, we needed to improve our relationships with our state and local election officials, the individuals that actually run our elections.
There you go.
Second, we need to improve the security and resilience of election systems, particularly by phasing out voting machines without paper ballots. Third, federal agencies needed to move faster, work better together with each other and our state and local counterparts, and be more proactive in order to detect and prevent attacks on our democracy. Over the course of the last few years, we met these challenges. We improved CISA's relationships with key partners through constant engagement in building an election security community of practice. This improvement is perhaps best represented by an election-specific information sharing and analysis center made up of all 50 states and thousands of jurisdictions. We improved the security of systems, scanning for vulnerabilities in election systems, providing intelligence briefings and rapidly alerting to emerging threats, and deploying security sensors, among other measures. And while we were principally focused on stopping actual hacks, we also had to contend with perception hacks, a form of disinformation which we countered with our rumor control website.
Yeah, they did do that because we got a lot of that stuff on our videos, actually. We were talking about election issues, and very interestingly, when I went and looked at one of them, there was the cyber security warning, rumor control. Get the real information about it. I had a number of people email us also. So they were putting this on our videos. They were saying, yeah, rumor control, hello. We're talking about actual litigation. We're talking about documents that have been filed, lawsuits, and they're putting this rumor control stuff on our videos, even though we're talking about stuff that's already in the public domain. It's not a rumor. It's a literal lawsuit that was filed in court. So I don't know how that's a rumor. And, this is what I'm talking about. It's a lot of this type of stuff. They did a lot of good things, but it doesn't really address the issue. It's great that they were scanning for electronic vulnerabilities. It's great that they're expanding their relationship with the local election officials. I think that's great. That's very good. We're happy that they do that. We want more of that. We want more coordination, cooperation, the feds making sure the elections are secure. That's great. But that's not the fraud that many people are claiming happened here. The fraud is that they weren't verifying signatures. So the people on the ground, the people running the elections were the ones responsible for it. It's not even a cybersecurity issue. This is a procedural problem. This is the rules were being bent because the laws had been changed at the last minute because of COVID. In almost every one of these battleground states, largely the Democrats were the ones filing the lawsuits to change the rules, to lessen and loosen the mail-in ballot requirements, to loosen the signature requirements, and so on. I've beaten this up for 6 weeks now. That is the issue. And what he is testifying about are other issues. He's talking about, rumor control. He's talking about making sure that they're scanning the software and that they have better communication between these federal agencies. It's all good. It's all good. Kudos on that stuff. We want more of that. We want more election security, not less. But we're missing the mark because we're not talking about these issues that many Americans feel are problematic. Let's listen to some others from Mr. Krebs. This is clip number 2.
Not seeing fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election, end of quote. The Election Infrastructure Government Coordinating Council, Executive Committee, and the Election Infrastructure Sector Coordinating Council, comprising of federal, state, and local government officials and numerous private sector organizations from all around the country, jointly call this, quote, the most secure in American history, end of quote. You also echoed the
Nonsense.
statement, and when you echoed that statement, you were fired by President Trump. He didn't want to hear that, clearly. So my question to you, do you stand by that statement? Have you seen anything in the week since November 4th that would lead you to change your mind? And have you identified any credible claim of widespread election irregularities?
I stand by the claim. I said it in my opening statement. It's in my written testimony. I'm yet to see anything from a security perspective, that would change my opinion on that. Fraud is a different matter. It's a criminal matter. But again, bolstered by the Attorney General's statement from last week or recently, again, nothing to change my opinion of that matter.
All right, so it's sort of like a Venn diagram. You know, there's two separate issues, two separate claims. On the one side, we're talking about security. You know, do you know, Chris? Do you know any vulnerabilities that would lead you to believe that the election had problems? No, security was great. Everything was fine. Even though we just learned that SolarWinds just hacked the entire country, right? So, how sure can you be on that? I don't know. I would suspect not very, because I still don't think that the country really knows what happened with SolarWinds. If you look at that, if you look into that, I think they're still scrambling to figure out what really happened there. And that may have nothing to do with the election, but the idea that there are zero security vulnerabilities or none, you know, he stands by that statement, I think is highly suspect in light of this new news. You know, 3 weeks ago, you would have told me and said, hey, there's a hack that literally infected every single agency in the United States, or all of the major ones, the ones that we all care about. I would have thought that's crazy. There's no way, right? I mean, why do we have all these different agencies? Why do we have CISA? Why do we have the NSA? Why do we have these different agencies if not to protect our national security infrastructure? The whole thing was blown out. You can watch yesterday's show if you missed that. It's a very, very serious thing. And Chris Krebs is just saying, no, everything was fine. Everything's good. It's the most secure election in history. Are you serious? Okay. So I don't buy that, because we've been covering evidence about how this thing was manipulated for the last 6 weeks, right? Or at least allegations about how they've been manipulated. So that to me doesn't sit very well, but I understand his point. It's really not that's not his wheelhouse. So the senator is asking him a question about something that is not really relevant to him, which is why he transitions. He pivots away from that. He says, no, from a security perspective, everything's good. Most secure election in American history, even though I have a lot of doubts about that in light of this new hack. That being said, he transitions. He says, well, the fraud issue, not my department. That's what the AG has to deal with. That's what Attorney General Barr has to talk about, because you prosecute fraud as a criminal matter. It's an issue separate and apart from cybersecurity and from election integrity. So he kind of punts on that one a little bit, and with good reason, because he can't talk about that stuff because he wasn't there. He wasn't on the ground. He was doing all of this stuff at a much higher level, and he's being called in, I think, because he presents well and because he's effective at his testimony, and the senators knew that. So let's listen. I think we got one more clip from him, maybe one or two. Let's listen.
So I think generally from a timing perspective, particularly with the seating of the Electoral College and 306 electoral votes.
All right, not that one. So let's listen to this one.
Disinformation campaign.
I think generally that disinformation now, currently, particularly domestically, is being used to create confusion and drive a certain narrative. But our point with rumor control at CISA was about identifying, initially foreign activities, but it became more of a domestic or even uncertain origin. And it was things, again, like hammer scorecards, some of these claims of malicious algorithms, and they were pretty straightforward to debunk in the early days, but they continue to this day. There's confusion being sown about how election machines are used, how they fit into the process. Even now in Michigan right now with Antrim County, there was a forensics audit done on some of the machines there, and there was a group that released a report. And it's a 22-page report. I looked at it. This is the report we mentioned. Looked at it, and to me, it implies that those systems are compromised and not dependable, and you can't trust the votes and any other of the machines across the state. So I was a little concerned about that, and I looked at the report, and it claims that there was a 60% error rate in the machines, the election management systems. And so, again, I dug into that, and it makes the claim that then 68% of the votes cast are therefore not dependable. And I've seen those claims being repeated on social media by the campaign, by the president. And so I wanted to understand what that was all about. So I looked at it, and in fact, it was not that there were 68% of the votes there were errors. It was that the election management system's logs had recorded 68% of some sort of the logs themselves had some sort of alert rate. And that is being used to spin that machine is not trustworthy. But the problem is the report itself doesn't actually specify.
All right. A lot on that. Number one, the rumor control issue, I think, is troubling. When you start talking about rumor control, my mind automatically jumps to censorship. I think we're seeing a lot of that right now. We're seeing that on YouTube. We're seeing that on Twitter and on Facebook. I think that's concerning. I think that the best way to deal with troubling ideas is to talk about them, is to bring them out into the open. I agree with him that bad rumors are problematic for the country. I don't think the solution is to not talk about them. As we've talked about on this show, one of the things that I've been trying to do to be useful in this conversation is to explore some of those ideas, to take some of those rumors, pull them off the shelf, open them up, look inside of them, dissect them a little bit right here with you on the program to see what we can make sense of. Some of it makes sense, some of it doesn't. I've been critical of some, I've been more supportive of others. And so that's what we do. We have this dialectic where both sides are talking and we're coming to a conclusion. We're synthesizing what makes sense logically and we're throwing out the rest of the stuff. But what he's talking about is playing ads in front of our videos. It's about, in my mind, just stifling speech. It's saying we're not allowed to talk about this stuff anymore because it's too toxic. And I think that's problematic. I think I have a really big problem with that. I think the better solution here is to talk about these issues. Now, he goes in and then he starts to dissect this separate Antrim County forensic report where, I think he's probably got a good point. Right? I don't know what numbers they're talking about. I don't know how that stuff works. But right now we have one side, we have one expert, presumably, who wrote the forensic report, and we have Krebs. And this is something that happens all the time in the law. It's called basically a battle of the experts. We have two experts here. They're looking at the same set of data, and they are coming to totally separate conclusions. Happens all the time, right? You have somebody who is involved in a sexual assault case. Somebody comes in and says, that's the guy who did it. Somebody else comes in and says, no, that they did that, right? And now you start talking about DNA, and then you start talking about consent and all sorts of things. And so you can take one presumed set of facts, which looks pretty simple. We're talking about, a sexual assault case or a DUI blood example. A lot of expert witnesses can be involved in these things. And you can look at one set of facts and have two entirely different positions on it. And so what you do, how do you solve that? Well, you litigate it in the court of law. You bring in your experts and you get them certified. You go through, a Daubert hearing, you go through and you actually make sure that your experts are who they say they are. And then you present the evidence and you leave it up to the jury. You let them decide. You let the facts play out. But none of that has been able to happen here. What we're seeing is a lot of this stuff taking place out of court. We have Ramsland, who says, this was fraudulent. Here are my credentials. You have Krebs, who says, nope, all normal. They were looking at the wrong data. How are you supposed to make sense of that? It's very, very difficult. And unfortunately, none of us really got to see this play out in the court, which is too bad. This is the last clip I think we have from Mr. Krebs. This is Senator Ron Johnson going through this same line of questioning where he just sort of is just rambling on and talking about whether, we don't know how this stuff works. Can you shed some light on it? I mean, it's a very ineffective question. Let's listen in.
You quoted which I can't remember, is that CISA group that declared this the most secure election in our...
What is going on? Why is that not playing? Well, I'm not sure why that clip's not playing. Let's try one more time.
You quoted which I can't remember, is that CISA group that declared this the most secure election in our history?
Yes, sir. That was the Joint Government Coordinating Council and Sector Coordinating Council statement.
Okay. One of the reasons I've always stated, based on our discussions, your testimony, that, to my knowledge, it's almost impossible to change the vote tally by hacking into these computers was based on the fact that, these things are not connected, and most of them don't even have the capability of being connected to the internet. Based on all these allegations people are talking to, it sounds like some of these machines, are certainly the tabulators, can and are connected to the internet. So can you just kind of explain to me what, again, I just...
Yeah, he doesn't make the machines. He doesn't run them. He's not Dominion. He didn't create them. He didn't sell them. He didn't do any of that stuff. He didn't design them. I mean, presumably he knows a little bit about it, but you're talking to the wrong guy there, Senator. It's very frustrating.
The whole voting machine, tabulation, internet connections is just a huge, confusing mess.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
So I think it's important to step back and actually
doesn't
look
answer.
at how votes are cast in the country, particularly with paper ballots, and that regardless of any internet connections, regardless of any foreign hacking, as long as you've got the paper receipt.
Okay, but let me stop you there. I acknowledge that. Yes, the paper backup is the control if it's used.
Yeah, so you see what Chris did there? He just parried that right away. You know, he can't answer that. He doesn't design the Dominion software. He probably doesn't know how they work on a highly technical level. So they're asking the wrong guy the wrong question. And he just punts that away. He says, okay, I really can't speak to any of that internet stuff. He doesn't say that, but he says, okay, let's talk about the paper ballots, right? Let's redirect, let's reframe this question into something that I can explain to you, because obviously you have no idea what you're talking about. And this is largely what it's been. I mean, a lot of these hearings have been Republicans who are very, very angry, but they don't know what to ask or what to talk about or how to, get in there and really cross-examine these people. It's very frustrating to see. Now, Rand Paul comes in. I think he hits it on the head. He's recognizing the same thing that I've been thinking. He's talking about, it's great you're here, but we're not asking questions about that stuff. Here he is.
But the fraud happened. The election in many ways was stolen, and the only way it'll be fixed is by, in the future, reinforcing the laws. And the only last comment I would say on what Mr. Krebs, and he can speak for himself, but I think his job was keeping the foreigners out of the election. It was the most secure election based on security of the internet and technology. But he never has voiced an opinion, he's welcome to today, on whether or not dead people voted. I don't think he examined that. Did he examine non-citizens voting? So to say it was the safest election, sure, I agree with your statement if you're referring to foreign intervention. But if you're saying it's the safest election based on no dead people voted, no non-citizens voted, no people broke the absentee rules, I think that's false. And I think that's what's upset a lot of people on our side, is that they're taking your statement to mean, oh, well, there was no problem in the elections. I don't think you examined any.
Yeah, I think he's exactly right about that. He's the head of a federal agency that's responsible for cybersecurity and infrastructure, not somebody who's boots on the ground checking signatures or making sure that the machines have not been connected to the internet or making sure that, anything that we've been talking about that we don't want to go wrong. He's not there confirming that it didn't go wrong. And that being said, his testimony was pretty effective. I mean, he answered the questions he didn't know how to answer. He parried them, redirected them into a different angle. And I don't think that the Republicans are looking too good on that. So, Senator Rand Paul, Senator Ron Johnson, they may be senators who are willing to join in on the Trump team, willing to join an objection with a different representative from the United States Congress. But I don't know how effective that is, right? Because if they do, if you have one from each party, well, now you're going to have a floor vote on the floor of both houses, but they don't control the House of Representatives. The Democrats do, and they're not going to throw out electoral votes. So I think it is still a long shot, long proposition, but they are having hearings about it, and we'll see what happens next. We shall see, as I like to say. All right, the last story that I wanted to cover was from Project Veritas, and I think this is getting to be interesting. Project Veritas released a video today about Julian Assange. So Julian Assange, we have not spoken much about on this channel, but as Trump's term may be getting a little bit closer to wrapping up, people are talking about his pardons and whether or not he's going to be pardoning Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, amongst others. And, as somebody who's been on this program advocating for accountability and transparency, I think that both those individuals are good examples of speaking truth to power, of holding the government accountable by releasing information that is highly valuable to the American public. Remember, without a lot of this information, we wouldn't know about these massive spy webs, that are infiltrating your life, my life on a regular basis. Now, they're sort of defunct now. Presumably, allegedly, but they're detailing for us what our own government is doing to us, and so I think that is an admirable thing because they're fighting for our rights, our individual liberties, our right to be free from governmental intrusion. And so I wanted to just pause on this and share this story because I think it is very pertinent. Now, Julian Assange, if you don't know, he has been charged with a number of different crimes. Julian Assange is the WikiLeaks founder or co-founder. He's, high up there, upper echelon of that organization. WikiLeaks has come under fire from both parties for leaking damaging information. And many people are very angry with WikiLeaks because of what they did in the 2016 election, which was detail a lot of what Hillary Clinton was talking about in her deleted servers. They had copies of all those. People were scouring those. We were getting, posts from John Podesta and the different people who were in the higher levels of the Clinton campaign. And so they were up in arms about this. Everybody wanted to take out Julian Assange because he was helping Donald Trump. WikiLeaks was, allegedly this extension of the Russian propaganda arm in the Russian government, and so on. And so a lot has been said now about whether or not Julian Assange is going to get pardoned, whether Donald Trump is going to, do that, which I would encourage him to do that. I'm not a national security guru by any stretch of the imagination, but I do know that an overbearing government is very problematic. And I think these guys helped to sort of unravel some of that over encroachment on behalf of our government. So I want to cover this story because one of the main claims about Julian Assange is that he was responsible for outing very important people in the United States government. And that outing, that public sort of reveal of who these people are, led to some people getting killed, right? Which I do not endorse at all, of course. We don't want that to happen. I'm not in favor of, of national security leaks that jeopardize the nation, right? I love America. I love our country. I love the people who are in our government, most of them who are, doing good things on behalf of the government. If they're there acting with integrity for the right reasons, we want more of that. We want to support them. And we don't, as a nation, we don't want national security leaks that are going to jeopardize lives or jeopardize our security. So that is not what I'm talking about here. But one of the main claims has been that Julian Assange, his release through WikiLeaks, was responsible for the death of Americans, right? These cables were released that implicated some of our national security interests. Well, that may not be the case. So this new information is a leak from a call that Julian Assange made to the State Department that was being run during the Obama years. So this was back during 2011, I think, is when this phone call took place. And what Julian Assange is doing is he's talking to an attorney from the State Department, and he's saying, listen, we've got this information. Somebody leaked us this stuff, and somebody else who is a part of WikiLeaks is now running with that information. So we sort of had a falling out in our organization. This other guy took this very sensitive, classified, confidential information, and they are in control of a portion of it. Julian Assange is making the call to the State Department to say, listen, we can help you stop some of this. We can help you identify who this individual is, where the data is being stored, what the encryption keys are, how you can access that information. So Julian Assange is making a very concerted effort to stop the leak of this bad, damaging information. And I think that's very pertinent because one of the main claims here has been this guy's a monster. He didn't care about America. He wanted to destroy America and he wanted to hurt American interests. But this newly leaked story from Project Veritas, from James O'Keefe, is a phone call from him to the State Department saying, I want to help you. I want to help you stop this. And apparently nothing happened as a result of that. So I think it's important to take into consideration when you're thinking about Julian Assange, when you're thinking about whether Trump should pardon him or not, does this sound like a guy who wants to take out America? Or does this sound like a guy who wants to, expose government corruption, but he wants to redact the information, or he wants to help America make sure that the damage is not overly out there? He wants to protect those very interests. So let's take a look at this article. This comes from Project Veritas. They release audio of Assange warning the U.S. government of damaging leaks of classified information. It says, in case any individuals who haven't been warned, that they should be warned. So he's giving them a sort of a warning shot. He says, listen, quote here, a whistleblower provided this audio to Project Veritas. The American people have more accurate account of Assange and his conduct. Political pressure is building for President Donald Trump to pardon Assange at the end of his first term. And this tape goes a long way to rebooting how he has been portrayed, O'Keefe says. Assange warns the State Department of an upcoming leak of classified information. And so this is from August 26, 2011. This is Julian Assange making a phone call over to a State Department lawyer. Again, during 2011, that's right when Obama is in office. And I even believe Hillary Clinton was still the Secretary of State at that time. So let's listen in.
Yeah, so the situation is that we have intelligence that the State Department database archive of 250,000 diplomatic cables, including declassified cables, is being spread around and is to the degree that we believe that within the next few days it will become public, and we're not sure of what the timing could be, imminently or within the next few days to a week. And there may be some possibility to stop it.
The documents originally obtained by Assange and WikiLeaks were to be redacted by WikiLeaks before any release,
and are these,
but were stolen.
And who would be releasing these cables? Is this WikiLeaks?
No, we would not be releasing them. Well, this is Daniel Dumscheit-Berg, a previous employee that we suspended last August.
And so he apparently has access to the material that WikiLeaks also has?
Yes, that's correct.
And he has access to everything that you have, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and that includes classified as well as the unclassified cables?
That's correct.
I see. And in terms of what they took, does that mean that they now have the ability themselves, without your control or authorization, to make this as available as they want? Is this now entirely
That's correct.
in their...
And there's no attempted redaction program and no attempted harm minimization.
Yeah, and so what we, this is sort of how this whole ordeal unfolded. A lot of information was leaked to WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden, and actually, I think Edward Snowden got a lot of that information on his own because he was working inside the government at that time. But what we saw back during that era is that once this information came out, there were, if it was not redacted, then there were names of people in there, American operatives that were overseas. And if that became public, then they're going to be, under the microscope of foreign agencies. They may have been working for foreign agencies, undercover individuals, spies, if you want to call them that, but they were working on behalf of American interests. And so before Snowden sent that information over to, I think it was Glenn Greenwald over at The Guardian, they went through a very rigorous process to make sure that harm was minimized, that information that was sensitive was redacted so that the public could be aware of all this stuff without jeopardizing lives, without jeopardizing American national security interests. And so, Snowden was more successful in making those redactions stick. Still got, still is considered to be a criminal for a number of different legal violations, but Julian Assange was unsuccessful in that, as he just explained. This is new information. A lot of people previous to this new audio recording had been saying, well, Julian Assange just took all that data that was highly sensitive and just threw it out into the public arena. But that's not the case, right? He made a phone call to the State Department to say, listen, this guy's the one doing it. I can help you stop this, and we can warn individuals who might be in harm's way. Here's a second clip from Project Veritas.
In case there are any any individuals who haven't been warned, that they should be warned. So the material, there is an encrypted version of the materials on the internet somewhere that we do not control. One doesn't actually need to convey the material itself. One only needs to convey the location of the material and its encryption key.
Yeah, and so, if you follow this story a little bit further, let's take a quick look at the remainder of this article. It says, the Australian-born journalist has been targeted by the U.S. government since 2011 when he partnered with Private Chelsea Manning, you may remember her name, an Army intelligence specialist who released documents and videos that Manning downloaded from Army computers. So that info was sent over to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. Manning pled guilty to violating the Espionage Act and accepted a 35-year sentence, but Manning was commuted. Her sentence was commuted 3 days before Barack Obama finished his term. So many people are saying, well, the person who gave WikiLeaks the information got a commutation, not a pardon, but a commutation, and got out of custody, just serving time served. So maybe Julian Assange should get the same treatment. For many years, Assange was holed up in Ecuador's embassy in London until he was turned out in 2019. He was apprehended by British officials acting in concert with the U.S. government. The day he was arrested by the British officials in 2019, the Justice Department unsealed his indictment. They charged him with conspiracy to commit computer intrusion, hacking. The conspiracy charge carries 5 years in prison, stems from Assange offering to help Manning crack a government password. So apparently there was some assistance there. Journalists have broad privilege to publish classified or otherwise illegally obtained information only if they do not participate in the acquisition. So that was the problem. Assange remains in British incarceration, awaiting his January hearing. It will be decided if he will be extradited to the United States. And I would fully support a pardon of him or a commutation or whatever that looks like. He hasn't taken a plea deal yet to my knowledge, so a commutation wouldn't be applicable. But, these types of individuals, I think, hold the government accountable. And I think it's important that we as Americans do the same and encourage our government to not overly penalize the people who are maybe requiring a little bit more of them. We want the government held to the highest standards possible, and that requires that we hold them accountable. So we'll see what happens with Julian Assange, but we'll continue to follow that story. Today was a very interesting release because a lot of the underlying allegations were saying that he was intending to go out and harm American interests, but this phone call from 2011 seems to show differently. All right, so let's take a quick look at some of these super chats that have been coming in. Got a few of them. We got Wolfgang Deo, who's making some comments about hacking into my system, saying, sorry about the music, was just hacking your systems, letting you know to install the newest security update. Wolfgang, I believe you, but we don't use SolarWinds here. But I will double check that. Miss Faith ran into my office. Apparently there was some music playing in my office. I don't know what turned it on or how it turned on, but I just sat down to do the show. My office started blaring music. Bizarre. We have Jeanne Briette, who says Dominion said intermittent connection to the internet in Antrim County in order to connect the media other places. He was forced to tell the chair. Yeah, so we saw that, right? There was an opening statement and then his sort of opinion on whether this stuff had actually transmitted, across the internet modified. So, very squirrely language. They say one thing, it sort of evolves into something else, and that's not uncommon. If you're testifying under oath, dialing down on someone's language is critical. It's almost the whole game. You want to pin them down and see what they have to say so that you can impeach them. Well, you said that it doesn't connect to the internet. Now you're saying that it does. So that doesn't sound particularly credible. Why in your opening statement did you say that it doesn't connect to the internet, but now you just admitted that you did? If you're not being as open and transparent about that one little issue, maybe that can be extrapolated to your entire testimony. What else are you not talking about? That's how you would use it to impugn their credibility. Got some other statements from Ron B. Says, also, Mr. Senator asked Mr. Dominion CEO, if you have a ballot jam, does it keep counting the same batch of ballots that were just scanned? Your thoughts. That meant to say Senator Lucido from Michigan. I've seen some other stories about that, this idea that if there is a jam, you run the same batch of ballots through. I think even in that one in the Staples Center, I think that was in Georgia, where they were counting ballots, there was a GIF or a GIF, an image where it looked like one lady was just running the same ballots through the machine multiple times. Now, I don't know if there's an explanation for that or what the backstory there was, but yeah, there's a lot of questions, right? There's a lot of things that are happening when you are running election, and you could have fail points anywhere. We have Sharon Quidney, who says, I heard the Dominion CEO say something about weighted votes or adjudication. What's that all about? Couldn't that be a source of some anomalies? Yeah, this was one of the early claims that I think kind of got debunked. It was, I think, largely from Dr. Shiva saying that you could weight the votes in the software. So in other words, you could go and you could say, my vote is weighted now. I get 1.2 votes, but you only get 0.8 votes. And so you could actually weight the votes, right? So every time I vote, I get 1.2. Every time you vote, you get 0.08. And then it tallies them up. And I think what they were using for when they were analyzing that was some of the company's own data that have, reports that have decimal points. So it'd be like, 100,000 votes, 0.2. Where does that 0.2 come from? How does that happen? If everything is a whole number that's, doesn't have any decimal points, how do you end up with a 0.2? And that, I think, spawned the further investigation, and it led to the idea that some of these votes may be weighted. We have Wolfgang Deo in the House, who says since there are contesting electoral votes alongside the official electoral votes, the office of the president-elect is disputed until January 6th. Go Georgia. And I think that's right. Until the votes are counted, it's still an open game, right? The votes have been cast. YouTube says that it's done and over. Many other people say that it's done and over, but Trump's people don't. They say they're going to continue to contest this thing all the way up through, I think, even January 6th now. I think Jenna Ellis said, we don't care what happens in January. We're going to keep litigating this thing until the end of the world. We will certainly not continue to follow that. If Joe Biden is sitting in the White House, we're not going to be like the Bernie people who say, well, he can still win 5 years later. That's not going to happen here. All right. Thanks, Wolfgang. We have Dr. Sammy D says, so if Dominion doesn't do voter verification, what are the serial numbers, barcodes for? Is nobody checking if the ballots have a valid checksum? Good question. Yeah, Dr. Sammy D. I don't know what the answer to that is. I think Dominion's response is, it's not our problem. We don't do it. We sold you the car. If they want to put unleaded gasoline in there at 89 instead of the 92, it's their problem. If they don't want to run things appropriately, if they don't want to change the oil and pump the tires up, that's on them, not on us. So you can understand that argument, and I think it's not a bad argument. It's saying we're not going to accept responsibility for how the local governments run their own elections. We have Kelly Alex, who says, I thought I read the 12th Amendment stated that the representation from each state having one vote, and there are more Republican states represented. Yeah, so you're right. So that would be if it is a contingent election. So let's break this up a little bit. If it is a contingent election, then every state gets one vote, and you would be right. But in order to trigger a contingent election, one of the nominees, one of the people who are running for president, they have to be under 270 electoral votes. So that would mean both candidates are under 270. If they're both under 270, then according to the rules, we have no president. We have no president-elect. When they count the votes in the Congress, they'll count. Somebody will be less than 270. They're going to have a contingent election. At that point in time, every single senator or every single state would get one vote. But in order to make that happen, Joe Biden is already at 306 electoral votes. So when they start counting those, there would have to be an objection from the representative and from the Senate. Then both the House and the Senate would break. They would have they'd have a debate and then a floor vote on it. Then they would reconvene. If both sides want to throw those electoral votes out, they get thrown out. If only one side does, then those votes essentially are counted because they look back to the votes that were certified by the governor of the state. And so based on that, my prediction would be that the Democrats would not vote to throw those out, and Joe Biden would stay over the 306. He really needs to just stay over the 270, and then that would take it out of contingent election territory, and it would just go according to the votes. We have another one from Wolfgang Deo, who says Arizona PEVL is not actual absentee voting, right? I don't know what that acronym is, Wolfgang Deo. PEVL. I have not heard of that as an Arizonan. I did mail in my vote. I did not vote absentee, though, because I do live here. He says, by denying access, it will be declared malice. Okay, so probably talking about the observers who are going into the different rooms, saying that if they were forcefully kept out, that might amount to some level of malice. We have Jeanette Irving says, what amount the audit of Dominion machines that took place in Michigan? So I think you say what about the audit that took place of the machines? So we covered that. We spent some time on that. I think it was Tuesday. We recapped a little bit of that at the very beginning of the program when we were talking about that forensic audit report that took place. I think that was the same report that Jenna Ellis was mentioning, and that's drafted. It's available in full. I think it's 23 pages. I think we have a link to it in our slides. So if you want to get that link, or just Google it, just Google Antrim County forensic audit, and I'm sure you're going to find that report everywhere. It's pretty easy to read, I think pretty manageable, so you can read through that if you have any questions about it. But the allegation here was that they wanted the Michigan legislature to see that there was a problem in Antrim and then extrapolate that to the rest of the state and then expand the audit so that they could really, sort of demand a recount, a re-audit, and then that might change the course of the election. We have Jeanette Irving, who has a follow-up question, says, I am aware of the issues, but if they look at the audit that took place in Michigan on the Dominion machines, it clearly said to overturn the election. Yeah, so Jeanette, you're exactly right. They're saying that they have no faith in their review of the material, but the other side is saying we have a ton of faith in it. So right now you have a battle of the experts. You have one entity who came out and said that there were some major problems. And so now, the next question is, well, what do we do with that? Do we authorize a deeper investigation? And I think that was what the point of that hearing that took place in Michigan was all about. They wanted to investigate it further, have the ability to ask and answer questions of the Dominion CEO, and then make a decision. So in Arizona right now, our GOP, our Senate President, has said we're gonna issue subpoenas to the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. That was based on their review of the evidence, their interpretation of what they saw. They took some additional legal action in order to go investigate further. So we're going to see what Michigan does on that. We have Vlad Tokarev, who says, can the same pair of representatives from the House and Senate object as many electoral votes as possible, or should that be a different pair? Thanks and great job. So Vlad, I don't know the answer to that. A lot of this stuff I think is kind of up in the air, and it's funny. I was reading from some other people who sort of live in this. The rules of Congress are very, very sort of. I would say kind of kept close to the vest. The way they run Congress is kind of a mystery to a lot of people. They do things a certain way, and I think for some of these issues that they don't do frequently, it feels to me like they kind of just make this stuff up as they go along. I'm sure there are formal, parliamentary rules written somewhere. I just don't know what they are yet, and so I don't think that it matters from what I have been reading. The rules that are in the U.S. Code, we went through a lot of, Section 15. We went through Section 7, I think all the way through 15 this week, and we didn't see anything about that. So on the face of the text, on the face of the United States Code documents, they don't tell us what the rules are. These rules are reserved for, they know what the rules are and they operate things. And some of the rules change on the fly. They actually just will say, this is how we're going to conduct these things and set the rules in the hearing. So I'm sure there's an answer to that question. I just don't know what it is. I would think that it doesn't matter. I would think that if you have one senator and you have one House representative and they both want to challenge every single vote, I would presume that they could. And then when they would break off into their individual chambers, they would probably go back into the same sort of procedures that they would have for any other type of debate. They would set a time limit, they would debate it, and they would rule on it. There are some time limits in the rules. I think they can break for 2 hours to discuss the issues. So that they don't have, they can't make this thing go on for 5 weeks. They need to decide quickly, and there are some pretty important constitutional limitations that come into play. If we get to January 20th and we don't have a president, there's a lot of other things that will trigger. We have Wolfgang Deo says, so 68% of the votes came up for secondary review. So again, it depends on who you ask there, Wolfgang. We have on the one side, the people who drafted the original forensic audit. They're saying that, 68% of the votes have major problems with it. If you look back at what Chris Krebs says, he says, no, that's not the issue. The votes were fine, but those were just being flagged for some other reason, which he didn't really go into much information on. He just says, well, you're looking at the wrong numbers. Those numbers don't really matter. They were just flags. But when you compare that with the other, paper ballots, for example, everything looks fine. We have SSW Lamb, who's back in the House. He says, hi, Rob. The prevention of the GOP dual electors to cast votes in Michigan is unconstitutional. The executive order report will be interesting. You are right. It will be very interesting. And many people were saying that was going to come out this Friday on the 18th, because that's what the executive order said. But I just saw, literally, I don't know why I do this. Before I get on the show, I usually will scroll through Twitter. And then I'm always like, oh, I want to talk about that. But it's too late because the show's starting. But I did see that I think it was Catherine Herridge over from CBS 5 or wherever she's at. She was saying that she had a conversation with the Director of National Intelligence, Ratcliffe, and he was saying that the report is ultimately going to be delayed until January, which is interesting. Because there's another pretty important deadline in January, which is the 6th, which is when they're counting the electoral votes. So she said that it's going to be pushed out into January because there's disagreements about what to include in the report. And I think that the issue there is whether to include allegations that China specifically was interfering in the election. So I just saw the headline, watched like 30 seconds of Catherine Herridge on that. Not sure how confirmed that is, but we were expecting a report from Donald Trump's executive order this Friday we're not going to be seeing that if what she said is true. Good to see you, SSW Land. We have Farmall Fanatic, who says, he may not be the creator of Dominion, but he was sure willing to say it was secure. Yeah, that's right. I know they all love to say everything is secure, 100% secure. The most, even Chris Krebs was like, we should give ourselves a victory lap. It's like, guys, have you looked around? Have you read the news? I know you're all feeling very good. I know you're all happy, patting yourself on the back. Nice job, guys. We ran a very good election. By the way, like 70% of Republicans don't believe you. Something like 30% of Democrats also don't believe you, right? There's a big portion of the country that has issues with how this thing was run. So while it may feel good to do a victory lap and be proud of yourself, there are still a lot of problems. We have Vegas Mooch, who says, Maria Bartiromo stating that her intel source told Trump won as a signal Trump will come out with a Frankfurt server info, martial law coming soon. So I did see that headline that Maria Bartiromo has an intel source. We've seen a lot of these intel sources around, but not much has come out after the fact on that. I would love to not see martial law, by the way. Do not support that idea one bit at all. I do not think that is the answer. We do not want the military taking control of our government. We do not want any of that stuff happening. And I'll be the first one to be vocal about that. I do not think that that is the right answer. All right, we have, who else we got? We have Newbie of Death, who says, thanks for another great show. Thanks, Newbie. I appreciate you being here, my friend. And looks like you might have a channel where you review stuff. So maybe check him out if you want to pop on over there. Thanks, Newbie. Appreciate you being here. We have Daniel Dresser, who says, so is it fair to say that Assange was framed by our government? This would keep him locked up and this would hamper any leaks on wrongdoing. And, listen, I don't know the details on whether he was framed or not. I mean, you could make the argument that here's hypothetically how that might work. The allegation as to why he was involved in some criminality for what he did was that he helped Chelsea Manning access the information, right? And Chelsea Manning, in order to get her commutation, in order to get a better plea deal, something that wasn't resulting in treason and the death penalty or something to that effect, they could have made her sign, or let's say encouraged her to sign something that implicates Julian Assange. This happens all the time. All the time. If you have co-defendants in a case, let's say we're representing two people who've been charged with a crime, what the prosecutor's office will do is they'll say, okay, you're representing these two individuals. Well, we're going to give person A a very good deal, but they need to tell on person B. And as an attorney, that's a huge conflict of interest. So we don't even take cases like that, because now we would say, well, if we're representing A and B, that's a problem because now A is adverse to B. So we don't want that to happen. So we don't take those types of co-defendant cases. But in this situation with Julian Assange, they could have done something like that. They could have said, Chelsea Manning, we're gonna commute your sentence. You're gonna get out of prison, but we need you to sign this statement. We need you to be willing to testify against Julian Assange. That type of stuff happens all the time. Don't know if it happened here specifically, but I wouldn't put it past our government. We have Mr. Bob For You with a nice little show of support. Thank you, Mr. Bob For You. Appreciate you being here. We got Wolfgang Deo again, who says, if the CISA guy cannot speak about things he didn't design, how could he possibly have been the right guy to have been at that position? Glad he was fired. Well, I mean, I think he was probably competent for the position that he was in. The real question is, why did they call him into the Senate and then ask him a bunch of questions about which he knows nothing, because it's not relevant to his job position? But that's what the senators do. They do this with everybody. They do it with Mark Zuckerberg. They do it with the Twitter guy, Jack Dorsey, all of them. Call them on in there. They have no idea what they're talking about, but it feels good. It looks good. They feel like they're being productive. In reality, they're not doing much of anything. We have Ryan Broderick, who says, Ratcliffe's report is due Friday. If he says that there was a foreign influence in the election, what powers does President Trump's 2018 executive order give him? And so, Ryan, I think... I'm not sure that the report is coming out Friday. I just mentioned that, but we went through his executive order in pretty I'd say high detail, and because it's an executive order, he doesn't have the ability to come in and modify what's happening domestically, because he doesn't have the powers to do that. The president is the executive branch. They enforce the law. Okay, the executive branch enforces the law that the congressional branch, the legislative branch, they write and pass the laws, and then the judiciary, they decide what the law is. They tell you what it is. They interpret the law. So if Congress doesn't do anything, then Donald Trump can't just go and start modifying things that are outside the scope of the purview of the executive branch. Now, what he does have control over are foreign relations, international relations that are not domestic. So in that executive order that we read through here, a lot of his powers had to do with those foreign adversaries. So if this report comes out on Friday or in January, whenever it's going to come out, and it implicates China, implicates Iran, implicates Russia, whatever it is, then he's going to have some power to issue sanctions against them. He can cut off some, financial transactions. He can limit trade. He can do all of the things that are typically reserved to the president, who is the commander in chief, who has a lot of power over those areas. But the executive order didn't give him the power to go and just say, well, we're going to call for a new election. That's a domestic issue. He doesn't have the ability to do that. So while it's a very prudent thing to, have our intelligence agencies do an assessment on an election, I think it's very important. And they're in the process of doing that. I don't know that there's a remedy in there that's going to enable Donald Trump to, somehow retain power. It's not a mechanism that's a part of the executive order, nor would you want it to be, right? You don't want a president to pass an executive order that says, I can do whatever I want, and if I don't trust the outcome of the election, I can just install myself as president again. So the remedy that's in the executive order I would say, is not particularly consequential to helping Donald Trump retain power. Now, that being said, if the report comes back out, let's say it comes out January 2nd, and it's catastrophic, we see that there's massive evidence of serious voter fraud, then at that point in time, that's good legitimacy, that's good cover, that could trigger a lot of the people in Congress through the will of the American people who have read this report and say, this thing is a disaster. Then they could, call their representatives, their senators, their House, their U.S. Congress people and say, this is a travesty. We are demanding now that you invalidate the votes that are being counted in the United States Congress. So it'd have to be something like that, I think, in order for it to be effective. Good question. We have The Wandering Mariner, who says, Rob, great book and moving story of how you arrived where you have. Thanks for doing what you do. Thank you, The Wandering Mariner. I appreciate that. That book is mostly for people who have been charged with crimes, and the beginning portion of it, there is a little bit of my backstory. So if you want to check that out, it's free. It's just go get it in our Discord server, or you can pull it up on Amazon. But thank you for that, The Wandering Mariner. I appreciate it. Hopefully you don't need any of the information in there, but I appreciate that nice feedback. We have Ron B coming in, who says, breaking news, the Georgia Secretary of State finally came out and said he wants a full state signature audit. Wow, a month and a half later, good grief, what do you got to hide? Wow. Okay, so that is news to me. I did see that Brad Raffensperger, who is the Georgia Secretary of State person, I did see that he was going to be doing a signature recount audit, I think in Cobb County, but many people were wondering why Cobb County, because nobody's complaining about Cobb County. Everybody's complaining about Fulton County. So if he is going to be doing a full statewide signature audit, I think that's good news and welcomed. All right, we have Curtis Bartle, who says, how do you figure out ballot harvesting without forensics? I mean, it's basically impossible, right? You need witnesses, you need evidence. This is why it's so problematic. You need some people who are willing to come in and testify. Now, even if you have people who are willing to come in and testify about this stuff, nobody cares. Donald Trump and his team, they have hundreds, thousands probably at this point, of affidavits saying that all this stuff happened. But the judges don't care, courts don't care. A significant portion of the American population doesn't care. A lot of the Democrats say, well, so what? That's just an affidavit. Well, that's a sworn statement under oath. It's the same type of statement that the Dominion gave, right? It's an under oath statement. They gave that. They said that there's this ballot harvesting. There's all these electoral problems going on. But apparently that evidence is not good enough. So I think to your point about forensics, they're not going to take every ballot out and match the DNA with the person who collected the ballots. You need some sort of video evidence, or you need an admission from somebody who came out and said, listen, I was responsible for collecting 10,000 ballots. Here's how I did it. And they walk you through the process. And, they would be able to identify those people and be very encouraging to them to help them remember their story and make admissions about that, right? Prosecutors do this all the time. They could say, all right, listen, we have enough evidence here to convict you on 25 charges of, fraud, electoral fraud, right? So you could get 200 years in prison, whatever the numbers are in your individual state. They say, well, we're not going to give you 200 years, but you got to tell us how this all worked. That's how they flip somebody. So then that person comes out, they tell you the whole operation, and then they get a little slap on the wrist. So if they were able to identify somebody like that, then that would be consequential. Okay, we go back on over to Wolfgang Dale. Wolfgang is on fire today, says, not Assange's fault if people died. Those in the government should have done a better job of keeping that info secure. They are at fault. And I actually have some sympathy with that argument. I can understand that argument. You know, I certainly don't want Americans killed. I never endorse that, and I would never say that, well, the government should have done better. That's their own fault. You know, I don't want to be overly calloused on that, but certainly, right? You know, the government, if Chelsea Manning can download some damaging information and convey that stuff over to WikiLeaks, maybe the real problem is the government. It's not so much Chelsea Manning. Why did one individual have the ability to go in and just basically disrupt the entire national security infrastructure, right? That is a big issue. And I think that's where these whistleblowers provide their value. They're holding government accountable. They're saying you guys have to do better, which I, of course, support. We have SSW Lamb who says, is there any truth that Dominion used solar winds? Krebs is wrong. It was 68% error rate, not 60%. So did he really read the audit? Winky, winky, winky. Okay, so Dominion, my understanding is I saw a screenshot from, if I can remember the name of the Twitter guy, CodeMonkeyZ, @CodeMonkeyZ, if that's his name. He posted a screenshot. And so I'm always skeptical about screenshots and stuff like that. You know, is it accurate or not? But he had one screenshot from some Dominion page where at the very bottom, they had sort of their logo. You know, this was built by SolarWinds, sort of like you see on the websites. This was built by whatever company. And they had that on their website. Well, that was through the web archive. They went back and they found it. It was there. And then after the SolarWinds hack was revealed, it's not there anymore. And then somebody else did some further digging into that, and they found it wasn't the SolarWinds Orion product. It was some other product. You know, it's a massive company. They got all different offerings. We covered a lot of that SolarWinds stuff yesterday. So they probably have some sort of business relationship affiliation with SolarWinds. Whether they were using the compromised suite, I don't know. Good question, SSW Lamb. We have Deathstorm who says, what about the alternate slate of electors sent by the state legislators who actually have authority under the Constitution? So I don't know that they do have authority under the Constitution. I think this is one of those things where they were doing this as a contingency plan. This was conditional. They were casting their electoral votes and knowing that they're not officially certified by the state, because the legislature details how these things get certified and they're stamped off on by the governor. And once that's done, those are the official constitutional electoral votes that get sent over to the U.S. House of Representatives. What we saw, and we covered this on Monday specifically, was all of these different competing electors were casting their votes. Some of them were doing it outside of the state buildings. They were doing it literally on the streets in Nevada and other places. And they were doing it as a contingency plan. So let's say, for example, we fast forward to next year, DNI Ratcliffe, his report comes out. So let's say January 3rd, January 6th comes out, and they say, well, we're going to start invalidating a lot of these votes for some reason. And something happens legally where they can count the alternative electors' votes in lieu of the previously certified votes. You know, so it's a backup plan. They're doing it to make their case that these are the rightful votes. And they want to do that because if the litigation moves forward, let's say, for example, that they didn't do that and they just said, okay, that's right, we're done fighting, game over, Biden wins this state's votes. Any additional lawsuit that's pending in court, the judge is just going to say it's moot. This issue's moot. The state has already certified the votes. There's nothing even to contest. Let's say the judge did roll back those previously certified electoral votes, but there's no other alternative there. In other words, they couldn't substitute Donald Trump's votes in lieu of Biden's votes because they didn't cast their votes. So they're casting them just as a placeholder. But whether those are going to actually make it into the House of Representatives, I don't think that is going to be a reality. It's a good question, though. We have Jamie Goodson, who says, caught your live feed late. Thank you for the informative info. It's all about truth versus lies. It's lies in the observer. It lies in the observer to decide. Yeah, I agree with that. You know, that's all we're trying to do here. You know, information is information. It's just data. It's one side interpreting information, another side interpreting information. I think the real value here is analyzing them. It's about discussing them. It's about sort of taking them apart, reviewing it from both sides just to see what fits and what doesn't fit. And I think there's a lot of value in the process. The process is more valuable than the ultimate conclusion. You know, it's about having the conversation and thinking through the issues. The conclusion is obviously important, right? Who the next president is very, very important. But we get the most value out of it when we just say, how are we going to get there? I think that's more pertinent. And I appreciate you being here. Hit the rewind button, Jamie, because you can catch the beginning of the show that way. We have Wolfgang Deo, who says, what is a commutation? Wolfgang, a commutation is a reduction of the sentence. So in Chelsea Manning's case, she got 35 years in prison. Barack Obama commuted that to time served, meaning those 35 years, they got deleted. So if she was in custody, let's say, let's say she was in custody for 5 years, she had a 35-year sentence. He gave her a commutation for time served. So she only has to serve the time that she was in custody for. So just the 5 years. The other 30 years gets deleted because her sentence has been commuted. We have R. Stifle, who says, what would happen if Trump invoked the Insurrection Act and declared martial law because of the fraudulent election? Well, I would have an aneurysm. I would be very upset about that, and I would come on this show and make that publicly known. I do not think that that is a good idea. To be honest, I have not read the Insurrection Act. I think that was passed in like 1807 through Thomas Jefferson in a whole different, situation. And so I haven't read it quite frankly, quite recently. And I don't think that it is even in the realm of possibility. I just don't think it is. A lot of people are throwing that word around lightly, like martial law is something that might be good. Like Donald Trump might use that to oust the swamp or, eliminate the deep state or those types of things. I am not a fan of a totalitarian, one-party, uniparty rule of our nation. I'm not a fan of that. If the election was stolen, fine. Stolen, we got to deal with that in a civil realm. We got to deal with that locally with our legislature, going in and telling your state representative they're not getting another dime out of you. They're not getting one follow from you on Twitter. They're not getting one, congratulations, brother. Nothing, not a single nice statement from you until they commit to reforming your local elections. That's it. It's the only issue that matters. Okay, they can talk about cutting taxes or improving the schools or fixing the roads or whatever it is. But if you can't have a secure election and you don't have people in office at your local level who are willing to make those cases, then everything else I think is moot. And remember, this is all happening at a local level. We're talking about the presidency. For me, Arizona, it's 3,000 miles away. And it's a whole different world. But remember, this is happening locally. The reason why Donald Trump and his team and Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis, they're going to the legislatures. They're going to your local legislature to talk to those people. And you have a lot of influence with those people because it's a small pool of representation. If I want impact, if I want to reach my U.S. senator, I got to compete with 8 other million people in the state of Arizona. But if I want to go reach my local congressperson, it's a much smaller bucket, right? I'm not competing with 8 million. I'm probably competing with, 50,000. I don't even know what the number is, but it's a much smaller, so I can have more impact. And those are the people who govern how your state runs its elections. Those are the people who need to do something about it. It's not the military coming in and taking over the country. We definitely don't want that. We have Wolfgang Deo who says, have you pondered Constitutional Amendment 14, Section 3? So it's hard for me to sort of detail exactly what Section 3 says. I can tell you this. I've spent a ton of time reading and understanding the 14th Amendment. A ton. Okay. All of those amendments, 13, 14, and 15, we spent a lot of time on. 14 is one of the biggest ones because of due process, equal protection, all of those things. A lot of time in constitutional law, really diving into that. So I don't know what Section 3 says offhand, but I'm sure I could opine on that for a very long time. We have Jamie Goodson who says, it's a chess game. The unknown move is key. Does right beats wrong at some point? Karma, whatever situation rules. Yeah, and we're going to see, a lot of people have been saying that for a long time, that Donald Trump and Sidney Powell and a lot of individuals out there have some missing key. They've got that puzzle piece that everybody's looking for, and we're all still waiting for it. Haven't seen it, though, thus far. We have Cable Box who says, listen to Colorado's Senate committee hearing if you get a chance. A cybersecurity expert made some pretty damning statements on election security, and that comes from Cable Box. All right, I will take a look at that. Colorado Senate committee hearing, cybersecurity expert making some damning statements on election security. Thanks, Cable Box. We will take a look. We have SSW Lamb who says, Rob, please check out the Epic Times I think it's Epoch Times 2020 election investigative documentary by Joshua Phillip. It's not on YouTube, but it is on their website. I'm a big fan of the Epoch Times. I don't know how to say it, but I subscribe to them over there. They have been doing a very good job. And we've covered Ivan Pechikov, somebody over there. He's a reporter. He's been covering a lot of the lawsuits. Does a good job. He's pretty well plugged in. And I would encourage you to go check them out if you're interested in sort of the alternative version of the Washington Post, the alternative version of the New York Times. When I do my show prep, I have a folder in my Google Chrome where I just open up all of the different, everything that's in there. And so I have this sort of a big spectrum of different sites that I check. Some very far left, some very far right. Epoch Times is more on the right, but I wouldn't call it, off the charts by any stretch of the imagination. I think there's some very good information. They do a good job. All right, another one coming in from Kenneth Fielder, who says the CEO did distance claim. Okay, so Kenneth, I'm not sure. CEO did distance claim. So I guess he's distancing himself from the claims. I don't know specifically. We have Newbie of Death, who says, you're like a super smart bartender that makes us get our own drinks. Thanks for putting up with some of us. Thanks for that, Newbie. Yeah. I'm just dishing it out. Hoping that you're enjoying those beverages, my friends. And the last one comes in hot from Wolfgang Deo. This is the last super chat. He says, would be interesting to see them match the DNA with the ballot. Ha, ha, ha. Yeah, and this is actually kind of a funny, it is interesting, right? I mean, what if we modified our voting system in a way that you had, some biometric accountability? I think Scott Adams was talking about this. What if you had an app that took a picture of you, recorded a video of you voting, took your face scan, took your thumbprint, whatever it is? That's pretty secure voting, right? You know exactly who voted. You know exactly whether they're alive or dead. You would know where they live. You would make sure, that they intended to vote, that nobody was, voting for them. Some interesting ideas floating around out there, but we will see if anything changes. I'm not particularly optimistic that anything will, but we shall see, as I continue to say. All right, my friends, we're going to leave it right there at that. I want to thank you. Well, hold on one second. Miss Faith just sent me one more. All right. We have this one. He says, from Isaac Castillo, who says, keep kicking butt. When will you and Uncivil Law do a live stream? I look forward to any collaborations you might present. So we sent him an email, actually, and I think we are working on something. Miss Faith is communicating with him to get something scheduled up. As I've said on this program, I'm still sort of getting the training wheels here on this program. And so I haven't really sort of figured out how to incorporate, other interviews. I don't know if I want to do them during the show. I don't know if I want to do them separately, whether I want to do them live or not, and whether I want to, kind of segment them out from these regular daily live streams. I'm still trying to figure it out, so I appreciate your thoughts and your suggestions, and thank you very much, Isaac, for the recommendation and for the support. So with that, we will leave it. I want to invite you one more time. If you've not already subscribed to our channel, please do so. We're getting real close to that 6-digit number. I'm super excited about it. So I would also love it if you shared it. If you sent it to a friend or a family member or somebody and said, hey, on this channel, he goes live every day of the week at this time, and we have some pretty reasonable conversations. We try to give each side a fair shake, talk about the issues as they stand, get rid of a lot of the hyperbole and the nonsense and the copy-paste journalism, the hysterical headlines that you see all over the internet elsewhere on the news. We want to just have a little bit more of a reasoned, down-to-earth, civil conversation like friends at a dinner table. So if you have anybody who you think would benefit from being a part of the program, we'd love it if you sent them our way. Also want to invite you to join us on Discord. That's our chat server, so you can join us for a conversation before the show, after the show. I'm going to put a copy of these slides today in that server. Actually, Miss Faith is, who's right there, back there behind us. And so you can also get a copy of my book in that program, in the Discord server, and you can make some friends while you're there. Let's take one more super chat before I hit the turn off button. We got a couple that came in. We have SSW Lamb says, any chance legacy media recant their statements about Hunter Biden's email scandal being Russian disinformation? I think 0 chance. And I think you probably know the answer to that question too. I would say 0 chance of that happening. They're all going to double down on it. I don't think the story is going to change at all. And we're probably not going to see much out of it. Actually, it's probably going to be the reversal of that, right? If Donald Trump appoints a special counsel, if anything happens that looks like the heat is getting turned up on Joe Biden or Hunter Biden, it's going to be cries of hysteria. It's going to say this is all a political prosecution. Donald Trump's giving the final, F you on his way out of the office to the Biden people. And it's going to, it's just going to be a different argument. They're just going to say, before the election, this was all Russian disinformation that the Trump team was peddling. After the election, this is all a political hit job. I don't think anybody in the media is going to ever acknowledge that, hey, maybe these pictures are troubling. Maybe some of these emails are concerning, because they're talking about the president, Joe Biden. I'm not sure that you're going to ever see a mea culpa from anybody out of there. We have epic. Okay, so Kenneth Slayer says it's epoch. Epoch is an era or period of time. Epoch. All right. All right. Well, that is it, my friends. I'm going to go work on my pronunciation of the Epoch Times, and I will be back here tomorrow, same place, same time. It's going to be 5 p.m. here in Arizona, which is Mountain Standard Time. If you go back on the West Coast, what you're going to see is 1 hour earlier, because that's how time zones work. In California, the show starts at 4 p.m. In Central Time, it's going to be 6 p.m. And on the East Coast, it will be 7 p.m. One final reminder, we'd love a subscribe if you just are tuning in. Otherwise, everybody, my friends, I will see you back here tomorrow. Before I sign off, one other thing. If you know anybody in the state of Arizona who's been charged with a crime, that's what we do. That's my job. That's my day job. I have a whole team of people here, our office, the R&R Law Group, amazing at what we do, and we'd be very honored if you trusted us enough to treat your referrals well. We offer free case evaluations. We love to help good people who've been charged with crimes. We're very good at what we do. We have a lot of passion for it. So be honored if you would send them our way. Other than that, my friends, I want to thank you once again so much for being here. I will see you right back here tomorrow, same place, same time. Have a wonderful evening. Sleep well. Have a delicious dinner. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.